Or do
It
I
is
just
now.
not see it on this end?
We are now recording.
There we go.
Okay. So welcome everyone to the 6th of our Let's Talk webinar series related to coping with the pandemic that we're all dealing with here at UA. And this one is about sleeping through a crisis. So it's going to be about sleep. This is me. I'm an assistant professor in the Caffeine College of Nursing and a researcher in integrated behavioral health, opioid treatment, and LGBTQA health. And I have with me today Dr. and Dean Patricia Carter. She is a PhD RN CNS and also a professor and assistant dean for graduate programs at my division, my department, the Caffeine College of Nursing, University of Alabama. She has...
You got the flyover.
For y'all, it's official. We started. Carolyn, is that Alabama's first jet flyover?
Yeah.
How about that?
That was great timing.
Yeah. So I'm really happy to have Pat Carter with me today. She is a sleep expert. She has 20 years of research and scholarly work focused on understanding factors that contribute to quality of life, even at the end of life, for vulnerable populations, specifically behavioral interventions to promote sleep quality in cancer and dementia patients and their caregivers. She is a recognized master educator as well, with numerous awards. She has her PhD from UCLA in nursing and her MS. I guess it's an MSN or MS.
Yeah, it's actually just an MS there.
Okay, cool.
Masters of Science with a specialization in nursing.
I realized I should know better when I looked at it,
Nope,
but I guess it was right.
Not necessarily.
Okay. All right, so today I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit about sleep basics, and if any of you have taken my Alabama sleep presentation, then you'll recognize a few of the slides that I just brought over for this. And then we'll talk about some sleep tips for right now. I'll talk a little bit about nightmares, and then we'll do some question and answer, and it's fine if we talk more about the things that I talk about in the next few minutes. So sleep basics. Why sleep is important right now. Sleep empowers an effective immune system. Sleep heightens our brain function. Sleep enhances our mood and improves our mental health. This is from the Sleep Foundation. And as you can see right now, dealing with this pandemic, all 4 of those things are particularly important. We need a good immune system, good brain functioning, enhanced mood, and improved mental health. So it's a really good time to think about our sleep. I like to say that one of the things I love about sleep is it's this beautifully intricate system. It's actually 3 patterns all embedded inside each other. And so I'm going to talk to you about the 3 of those pulling out. And the first and smallest of these is the sleep cycle. And you don't need to know specifics about it except really to know that we tend to follow a pattern and that it starts with lighter sleep, and then we get into really deep restful sleep, and then we have this stage where we're dreaming, and it's characterized by rapid eye movements. So most of us know about REM. The next thing is that that's embedded in a nightly cycle where we go through these waves, and we generally go through 4 or 5 of these a night, and they're usually about 90 minutes long, where we'll fall asleep following the red line of good sleep, drop down into deep sleep, pop back up into REM, and then go back through light sleep to deep sleep, back to light sleep and REM, until towards the end of the night, we're only getting REM and light sleep, and we're tending to get a lot of REM. So that's the important thing about the nightly pattern to remember. And then that pattern is embedded inside a daily pattern where we go through a cycle where our nightly sleep is triggered by the release of chemicals inside our body, and melatonin is one of the important ones. And one of the things that happens is that our sleep gets more disrupted over age, and melatonin is part of one of the reasons why. And you'll see here what happens, that melatonin released in the body when you're 5 or 10 years old spikes, like the first feared estimated spikes we were going to have with this pandemic. But as you get older, you flatten the curve, as you see. You end up down here. So melatonin supplementation is something that happens really often as you get later in life. So I'm going to come back to this slide for just a second to talk about the ways sleep can mess up, because we'll be talking about those a lot. And that's this dotted line pattern. One of the things that can happen is that you can have trouble falling asleep. So you'll see here, you might get in bed but stay awake. Another thing that happens is you can have light sleep. So you see you drop down into light sleep, you never get into the deep sleep, and you pop back up. And so you never actually get that really restful deep sleep, the slow wave sleep mentioned here. Another thing that can happen is as you come back up towards REM, you just shoot right back awake. And sometimes you can't get back to sleep. So that's another common problem. And then over here, you'll see that one of the things that can happen is you're supposed to be getting that REM, you actually just wake up too early and don't go back to sleep. So these are common patterns that can go wrong. And one of the things that we know is that if you can sleep, but you wake up tired, something's not right. Okay, so how stress can affect our sleep. Stress disrupts the quantity of sleep we get. It disrupts the quality of sleep we get. It energizes us to attack problems and creates a vicious cycle of stress and sleep deprivation. And that part where it energizes us to attack our problems, that's particularly important, because if you are activated and stressed and angry and afraid, you will not be going to sleep. So right now, if you're trying to get on Facebook or watch the news before you go to sleep, you are probably going to be exposed to something that's going to activate you, and then you are not going to be going to sleep. So that's important to remember. And so the last part is as we have more sleep deprivation and as our sleep, we have more problems with our sleep and we get less sleep, we actually get more stressed and have a worse time trying to manage stress, which disrupts our sleep even more, which makes us even more stressed, which disrupts our sleep more. So those things can really spiral if you're in a situation where there's a lot of stress. And that brings us to the fundamental problem that we have in trying to help with our sleep, and that's that we can't force ourselves to fall asleep. All we can do is make the conditions right and let ourselves fall asleep. And so we'll be talking more about that as we go. So why now? Why are so many people having sleep problems now? And I got on Facebook to ask a bunch of my friends about what kind of sleep problems they're having, and it was, I got a lot of responses. A lot of us are struggling with sleep right now. So we have dogs now too. Cats, dogs, birds, jets, everything. Okay, so there are, currently we're experiencing a lot of disruptions to our daily life. And so this can be difficulty adjusting to a new schedule or the lack of a schedule. This can be a loss of time anchors, like having to get up and take the kids to school and be at work a certain time and, you know, go to church and go to our social events that are standing events that we go to all the time. And as we lose those regular standing moments in our day, our sleep can just start shifting around and our entire daily pattern can. Cabin fever is a major disruption to daily life for many of us. Being stuck at home can be awesome or it can be terrible. And some of us are dealing with that. We can have a loss of Zeitgebers, which is a new word to me, but that is light-based cues. So if we're staying home, but we live in an apartment that's internal to a building and there's not really any good natural light coming in, we're actually losing that cueing about what the 24-hour schedule is and what's going on with the day. And if you are in a situation where you don't have regular access to sunlight and you're having to stay there, you need to figure out some way to cue your body using light. And then many of us are also oversleeping right now. There's not a lot of reasons not to sleep when we're stuck at home and some of us aren't working. But if you're sleeping more than 7 to 8 hours a night, it can make you wake up on time, or it can make waking up on time much more difficult, even with alarm clocks. And it can leave you really groggy and irritable and unfocused. So a lot of people think that there's no problem with oversleeping, but oversleeping can actually affect you negatively too. So other things going on right now, a lot of us are feeling anxiety and worry. We're afraid for ourselves and others, and afraid for our own economic health and the economic health of our communities. A lot of us are feeling depressed and isolated. And in addition to that, many of us are grieving because we've lost important events in our life. We might have lost important people to us, or just the kind of life that we built and loved. There are lots of things that we're grieving right now because there are lots of things we've lost. And there's also greater family and work stress, and it's not like you can get away. We're used to being able to get away if we need to. We can call in a sick day. We're all taking sick days right now. We can get away from family if we need to normally, but right now it's really hard to do. So that constant exposure to people can be tough, and we'll actually be talking about that a little bit next week. And then another thing is that a lot of us are filling our free time now, with more screen time. And that can disrupt our sleep, as well as contributing to the anxiety and worry and depression and isolation. And then the last is stress-related fatigue, because we're all in this awful situation where a lot of us are feeling stressed all the time. And some of us are having to work and feeling like we don't have much control over how much we can be safe. Because of that, many of us are actually having stress-related fatigue, which is just this kind of constant weariness, where even if we slept a lot, even if we've been eating well, even if we exercise, we just can't seem to get our energy up and get moving. So those are some contributors to why right now can be a particularly hard time for our sleep. So let's talk about sleep tips for a minute. I should say that Pat sent me many of these links. You'll see the URLs on the bottom. She sent some stuff from the two of her favorite websites. So check those out at the bottom, but I'm also giving you a summary version of this websites. So around the same time every day, do these things. The idea is sleep is one of our rhythms. And so if we keep our daily rhythms, we can keep our sleep rhythm and we'll sleep better. So around those rhythms, you get up around the same time every day. Get bright light into your eyes within a few minutes of getting up around the same time every day. Have your first social interaction around the same time every day. Eat your meals around the same time every day, especially breakfast if you can, and try to exercise around the same time every day. But in particular, avoid being sedentary. If you can get activity, it's good for you. Another thing you can do is to try to keep your daytime and nighttime separate. So think about them differently. Think about the activities you do during daytime and the activities you do during nighttime, and try not to blur those too much. That'll help you keep those cycles. And then keep your lights dim and block blue light on devices 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. I always say just leave your devices alone 1 to 2 hours before bedtime. It's a good time to read a book or something else that's gonna take you down. One of the things I always tell people if they have trouble going to sleep, try reading those academic manuscripts that put you to sleep at 3 p.m. and see if they help you go to sleep at 8 p.m. too, or 10 p.m. whenever you're going to bed. But the advice was to block blue lights. Evidently, blue light's the problem. And the point is to support the body clock and the daily rhythms that we keep. Okay, and then there are some more sleep tips from sleepfoundation.org. Stay active, practice kindness, and foster connection. I was just talking about isolation, depression, and stress and anxiety. Being grateful, being kind to each other helps disrupt stress and anxiety and bring in more positive feelings. And connection helps to disrupt that isolation and depression and can bring up more positive coping. Utilize relaxation techniques, which are also positive coping. When I talk about coping, what I like to tell everybody is to remember that we all cope, or none of us would be alive. Like, we cope and stay alive, and we stay alive because we cope. So we all cope, but we have a lot of variation in how we cope. And most of us are aware when some of our coping is good and some of our coping is bad, and we pick from both bins. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to recognize when we're using good coping that's going to contribute to our health, or having a second cocktail that might not be good for us as far as our sleep pattern, even if it helps us fall asleep better, right? Because that's not necessarily healthy coping, even if it's coping we use, right? So keep that in mind. And relaxation techniques are one of the good coping things that we can do. And there's no time like the present to practice and get good at them. A lot of times we'll say, one of my favorite jokes about meditation is, if you can't find 20 minutes to meditate, you probably need to meditate for an hour. Well, most of us can actually find 20 minutes to meditate right now, so it's a good time to get in that habit. Another one is watch what you eat and drink. Unhealthy foods can be great coping. I had some ice cream last night, and I'm trying to be off dairy, right? So there's good coping and bad coping. But when we eat things that are not good for us, they can leave us feeling bad and disrupt our sleep as well. And then the final thing is to remember that your doctor is still there. There's a lot of telemedicine happening. A lot of appointments are happening over a video like this. And if you need help, you need help. So try reaching out to your doctor. Okay, so there are a couple of tips. I'm going to give a short version, and we can come back to these and give them a little more time if they come up as questions. But one of the things that can really help when you're trying to go to sleep and you've just got your mind racing, which is a really common problem when you're feeling anxiety, is to change your situation, change your context. Get out of bed, go and sit at the table, and get out a pad of paper and write down everything that your brain wants you to remember. Everything that's going through your head, all of the things that your brain seems to think you need, and just do that until there's nothing else there. And once you get to that point, put your pen down, put the pad down, and go back and get in bed and see if you can go to sleep. This trick works actually really well for worry scheduling. One of the things it does is it breaks that link in your brain between trying to remind you of things that you might not actually need to remember at night. But it also teaches you how to face what it is that's bothering you and then back down off of it, and reconnects your bed only with sleeping, not with worrying and stressing and trying to remember about the next day. So if you can do it for 2 to 3 weeks, it works even better than if you just try it 1 or 2 times. And then there are a whole lot of these good sleep behaviors. The shorthand on this is if you treat your body like you're a 1-year-old, then your body will respond by sleeping better. So do's are have a comfortable bedding and a soft pillow, a dark, quiet, cool bedroom, try to exercise but not close to bed. A warm bath a few minutes before bedtime can be good, but not piping hot. Have a light snack, carby, nothing heavy or spicy. Some soft music or nature sound, something that can calm you down, do some relaxation, and also talk to your doctor if you need to about how to manage it better. And then don't take too many naps during the day. A lot of my friends were reporting that naps are happening. A lot of naps are happening these days. But, and I'll say that I mentioned earlier about the stress-related fatigue, and there's an important concept to understand, and that's that sleepiness and tiredness are different things. We can work really hard and be tired, but it can be 4 o'clock and we're not sleepy. Or we can basically sit around all day and it comes to midnight and we're sleepy, but we're not really tired. So with that stress-related fatigue, we can feel like taking a nap is going to make us feel better, but then we take the nap and we get up and we don't feel better. That's because we're not actually sleepy, we're tired, we're stressed. And it might help you feel better too if you're overstressed, if you've been like missing sleep and stuff. But keep that in mind, tired and sleepy are different things. So the rest of the don'ts: no caffeine too close to bedtime, technically not after 2 p.m. or recommended not after 2 p.m. Don't smoke or use tobacco products for an hour before bedtime. Alcohol 4 to 6 hours before bedtime can really disrupt the quality of the sleep you get, although it can help you fall asleep. So people think it's good for their sleep. It's not actually good for your sleep. And then bright, noisy stimuli before bed can keep you awake. So I will say just a couple of things about nightmares, because I'm sure we'll talk about more of those in question and answer. But what we're all experiencing right now is a social trauma. And with trauma come nightmares. Nightmares are one of the ways that our mind processes what's happening to us during our day and processes the emotions we're feeling and the things that are going on for us. And what our brains are really, really good at is telling stories. And so dreams are our brain pulling in all of these symbols and memories from the day and connecting with the feelings and turmoil or whatever you have going on in you, and then telling a story in your brain that draws those things together. And when you're experiencing a trauma like we're experiencing right now, it can be pretty unpleasant because that's actually what we're living during the day. And because it's unpleasant, the symbols and images that our brain puts together are also unpleasant. And so we can end up having some really intense negative dreams. Now, if your dreams are nightmares about specific events where you're recalling something negative that happened, that's something a little different. That's something that you should talk to a mental health expert about. But when what you're having is just like odd dreams or really intense dreams where your brain is just sort of making stuff up, or if it's like a recurrent pattern but not something that actually happened to you, then it may be that your brain is just trying to figure out what's going on right now. And this image I have here is actually called the nightmare. It's actually not well presented. I should have brought that line down here. But this is an image of a mare that is sitting on a woman's chest while she's trying to sleep. And the word nightmare actually comes from that legend where we have those in-between times. And if you start to wake up before your body actually gets turned back on, then you can feel like you have trouble breathing. You can feel like something's pressing against your chest. And oddly, you can feel like there's someone evil in the room. That's actually an experience related to that. And almost all of us had that experience when we were kids, but as we become adults, a lot of us don't have those experiences anymore, but some of us do. And so that's the legend of nightmares. And I bring that in because sleep is such a delicate, sensitive thing that when it disrupts, it can be really scary. And so nightmares also are one of the ways that our sleep can be disrupted and be really scary. The thing to think about with sleep is not that what's happening in your dream is true or is tangible. It's better to think about your dreams as messages to yourself about how you're doing. So if you're having nightmares about a green oozing blob coming in from under your front door into your house and you're really scared of it, think that your body might be telling you that you're anxious about a contagion getting into your house when you don't want it there, right? Dreams can make sense when you start thinking about them as messages back to yourself about what you're experiencing. Okay, so I'll stop there and we'll move on into the question and answer part of this. So I have to run inside and grab my pad because I forgot it again, but I wrote down some questions that friends of mine have been asking me about this. But we'll start with people who are actually here today on the call. What questions do you have for Dr. Carter about sleep? Actually, somebody's bringing me the pad. Thanks, Holly. Okay, is anybody out there?
It looks like we have several people out there,
Yes, we do.
and they can type into the question and answer or the chat box, which is
Right. Thanks, Pat. I always forget to tell people to do that. You can put your questions into the chat box, type them in, or you can raise your hand and we'll try to, I think that they can raise their hand. And we can try to get a hold of them, not on video. So, Pat, to get started, one of my friends asked me about using melatonin. So what do you have as a recommendation about melatonin?
So generally, my recommendation about melatonin is, first off, it's sort of the general recommendation about any nutraceutical or any supplemental item, be it vitamin C or melatonin. Typically what we're doing is we're going into a pharmacy, CVS or Walgreens or something, or we're seeing it online that, oh, here's some melatonin, here's a sleep aid for you. First off, we don't really know what's in that pill. It says melatonin on the label, but it may or may not be, and it may even give a dose on the label, but it may or may not actually be what's in there, and it may not be in a form that our body can actually absorb and use. So my first caution is always be sure that what you're getting is really what you think you're getting. My second recommendation when it comes to melatonin is to find out if you actually really need it. Because like you had mentioned, Josh, melatonin is something that our body naturally produces. So if it is producing it at the level that we need to function appropriately, if we're taking it exogenously or if we're adding in external melatonin, our body naturally says, well, why should I bother making it? You're just going to give it to me in a pill form. And so we actually feel a rebound if we ever stop taking it. And that's generally what people will do, is they'll get a recommendation to maybe, okay, you're going to deal with some jet lag or something. You travel to Europe and your doctor says, well, take some melatonin to get over the jet lag. And so they start taking it and they think, oh, this is working. And they take it on a regular basis. And then they start experiencing some rebound because their body's trying to catch up to take it themselves. So one of the things that I generally recommend is if you're not doing it to manage your sleep cycles that have been shifted because of jet lag or something like that, that you can actually be tested to find out if your melatonin, your natural melatonin, is low. Typically that happens in children and elderly. So like you demonstrated as well, in children, they should have a really high peak of melatonin, but maybe their system is not developed in such a way that it's allowing them to get that peak. And so we can supplement there. We will also sometimes supplement with elderly folks if their level is not quite high enough. So my general rule is try to strengthen your circadian rhythm and your sleep-wake cycles in other natural ways before you take melatonin, because oftentimes we're looking for a quick fix that may actually generate more of a problem than a fix. So,
what about shift workers?
Shift workers, again, even with shift workers, I would say that because we're in a 24-hour society for the most part, not so much now with COVID and things shutting down at different times, Walmart isn't open 24 hours anymore. Since we're in a 24-hour cycle, shift workers, unless they have to be awake and functioning in their off-shift time, would be better to shift their entire life to that time. Now, us being faculty and working with people, a lot of times what we have, like I'm thinking of my graduate students who work night shift as a nurse, and then they come and they do their day shift classwork. Now, thankfully, all of our graduate programs are online, so they can do it in their regular shift schedule. But if they have to actually come into class, their body is competing with day shift, night shift. I would, before I suggest melatonin, I would suggest that they, again, try to keep in a cycle. Because even if they're flipping day-night, if their body knows that, okay, on Tuesday I'm going to be awake during the day, but on Wednesday I'm going to be awake at night, on Thursday I'm going to be awake at night, but Friday I'm going to be awake during the day, and they follow that routine schedule, their body will adjust to that schedule. Because the best thing that you can do is put yourself on a schedule and keep yourself on that schedule. Which
predicts the next question. I'm going to ask you Molly's question before Holly's question.
Okay.
We have a very illiterate assonant group here today. Holly, Molly. So Molly said, I maintain a normal sleep work schedule for the first few weeks of quarantine, but now I find that I'm sleeping a lot more and have a hard time getting started in the mornings. Do you have any advice for getting back on track with a sleep routine?
Yeah. So again, it's, going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time. The actual sort of good thing to quarantine was that we all, 98% of the population went into quarantine sleep deprived, chronically sleep deprived. So the first couple of weeks, it actually gave us an opportunity to sort of make up or pay off some of that sleep debt. So we sort of did that. We, like you say, we didn't have to set the alarm clock to get up at the same time. We didn't have to run on that same schedule of sleep debt that we had been normally used to. And in fact, now we can fall more into, it's like going on a 2-week vacation or a 3-week or a 6-week vacation, where you get up when you feel like you're awake and you fall asleep when you feel like you're tired. And it's about paying attention to your body cues. Like, I know whether I have an alarm clock or not, I'm going to wake up somewhere between 6 and 6:15 a.m. every single day. That's what I'm going to do, because that's when the light gets light enough in my room that I'm going to wake up. And so you need to be able to have and pay attention to what your body cycles are. But if you need, so back to the question, try to answer that. If you want to get back onto the schedule that you were on before, you need to pay attention to going to bed when you're sleepy and getting up, making sure that you get up at that same time. If you get up at that same time, set your alarm clock so you'll get up at that same time, and then pay attention to what you're doing during the day, that it will allow you to feel, like you had mentioned earlier, tired enough and sleepy enough to fall asleep when you should, in order to be able to get up at that same time again the next day.
So we have several questions in the queue now, which is great.
Yay.
Holly asked, I'm having the sleepiness without actual tiredness. What can I do instead of nap?
Right. So one thing, first off, naps are not always bad. Naps to try to cure boredom is not always a good thing. So if you're bored, if you're napping because there's nothing better to do, find something better to do. Primarily, I suggest motion, getting up and moving around. Do not choose to eat during that time, because then again, if you're eating when you're not hungry, it's almost as bad as sleeping when you're not hungry. You're actually disrupting your body, and it's saying, well, I was sending a boredom cue, but you're giving me sleep. Or I was sending a boredom cue, but you're giving me food. And so your body doesn't really know what signal, what kind of response am I going to get in the signal that I'm sending to you. So if you're wanting to nap and you're not feeling sleepy, and it's not a time of day when you feel like, if you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you want to nap at 10 o'clock in the morning, physiologically, you should actually be at your most alert at 10 o'clock in the morning, not feeling sleepy. Now, if you feel sleepy at 2 o'clock in the afternoon after getting up at 6 in the morning, that's your normal circadian dip. That's your siesta time. And that's actually an ideal time to take the right size nap. But if you're napping because you're bored, if you're napping because you're stressed, if you're napping because you're depressed or you're trying to avoid something else, then you need to engage with what that signal is that your body's sending. So if you're bored, get up and move around and do something to engage yourself. Do as I'm doing, as Josh had suggested in a previous one. If you're tending to feel like you're low energy, stand up instead of sitting down and sinking lower and lower and lower into your desk. And just, I guess, pay attention, and this is an ideal time for us, like practicing the yoga and practicing meditation, is pay attention to the cue that your body is sending you, and then feed it back the response that it's asking for.
I really like what you said, because I would you normally have said, "Hey, go out and take a walk," or like I would have made a concrete suggestion. And I think it's such a good suggestion to just say the response to feeling bored is motion, to just do something that gets you moving. I really like that. Okay, so we have a question here. How long should it typically take to fall asleep?
That is a really good question. So, as a sleep scientist, my typical, what we understand is that good sleep is a few different things. You should fall asleep between 5 and 15 minutes, approximately. If you go 17, I'm not worried. If you go 4, I'm not worried. If you fall asleep in 0 minutes, like your head is hitting the pillow and you're falling asleep, you're actually falling asleep too fast. That means you're sleep deprived. Okay? If it's taking you 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and you're still not feeling sleepy, that means you're actually trying to go to bed either when you're not sleepy or you're going to bed too stressed. Because if you're stressed and you're trying to go to bed, again, you are trying to put yourself in the most vulnerable state that you will ever be in, sleep, right? In a heightened awareness state. So you're competing with each other. You're asking your body to do two competing things. Be vulnerable and fall asleep. Be aware and alert because there's stress, there's danger out there. So they construct against each other. So if you're laying in bed awake after 20, 25 minutes, please don't stare at the clock and say, oh, this is it, okay? Then it's taking you too long and you're starting to build up that stress response, which is going to prevent you from being able to fall asleep. And that's when you get up and do the suggestions. Like Josh had said, do some other things. I like the worry journaling. Sometimes what you might want to do though is maybe you don't really have some concrete worries, but maybe it's just getting up and doing something else, just to disassociate bed and worry. Your bed should be sleep and sex only, period. No eating, no doing the bills, no fighting, no stressing, sleep and sex only.
One of my favorite quotes about sleep: if you use your bed for anything but sleep and sex, you'll do less of those things.
You'll do less of both. Yes,
that's right.
Less of both, absolutely. So again, back to the question. Typically, it should take you between 5 and 15 minutes to fall asleep. Any more, any less, we're going to start digging into what the issues might be.
Yeah, and going to bed and trying to do something until you fall asleep can really disrupt that, right? Okay, we have a question here. What about unrealistic things that wake you up, such as in deep sleep, then feel there's a snake or any other something in the bed with you, then you wake up and are not lucid enough for things to make sense, where reality and the dream world coincide, where you're not sure of the current reality, which then causes the fears of how to react?
Right. Well, you have some very articulate people on.
I know, right?
So this is a really, really good question. So I do a number of different seminars, and one of the most favorite seminars that I do is one about dreaming. What do dreams mean? What should we do with them? How are they supposed to? And lucid dreaming. So can it be done? How do I train myself to do this? And some of it has come out of the different sleep dream movies. You know, it's like this fantasy that you can do these things. So dreaming and when you're waking up and not waking up at the same time, basically what we call that is, so I like to think of sleep as a wake, sleep, wake cycle. So whenever we look at the phenomenon of sleep, we look at it as it is bracketed between two wake states. So sleep and wake are not separate. They are fluid. Okay, so you're going to go from one to the other and back into the other. And whenever there is a fracture between that transition is when we experience a number of different kinds of things. So you're going to feel like one of the common things that we feel or people report is sleep paralysis. So your brain knows that it's awake, but you can't move your body. And then panic sets in because none of us like to feel paralysis, right? So your panic sets in, and then you can't move and you can't move and you can't move. And actually, what seems to be counterintuitive, the best thing that you can do at that point is fall back asleep. And then your sleep and your wake comes back into alignment, and you can move from one stage into the other. So it's a momentary fracturing between the two. And when you think about how close, where REM, or that real, so we can dream in both REM and non-REM, but REM sleep is where your neurons are creating the most fantastic, most out of the box thinking that your brain ever does at any point. And so that REM state is very, very close to wake. And so it's real easy to sort of tip between REM and wake, right? So if you're having a fantastic dream, pleasurable or unpleasurable, it's easy for you to sort of tip your toe into that wake state. The best thing that you can do is to just sort of send a message to yourself, okay, fall back to sleep and finish that dream. Okay? And you'll recognize that the snake was really just maybe a sock that you kicked off in the middle of the night and it's in between the sheets, you know, and it's not really something that's there that's threatening. So
that might be hard to do if you've, like, with half of your brain think there's something in the bed with you. Right.
Right. And so that's why it's interesting, because not only are we our most creative at that time, but we are also our most susceptible to suggestion. Okay, our brain is basically laid open to suggestion. Monsters don't hide in the closet during the day. They hide in the closet and under the bed in the middle of the night, right? So our brain is the most susceptible to suggestion during this time when it's in that sleep-wake state. What we forget is that it's also the most susceptible to positive suggestion. So if you have ready in your mind practiced a response to a stressful experience, a positive response to that stressful experience, then your brain's going to accept it, and it's going to go, and it's going to be fine. Just like if you have a negative response, it's going to accept that, and it's going to go with it. So we have to practice during the day. What am I going to say? How am I going to respond to this? What is a positive thing that I can do? So for example, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, and this is a common thing that I hear from a lot of people, wake up too early, right? I wake up and I look at the clock and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I don't need to be up until 6. I could look at the clock and say, oh, damn it, I'm awake again at 6, sorry. Darn it, awake again at 6 o'clock in the morning, or at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to be up till 6. I know I'm going to be tired all day long. I'm not going to get this done. I might as well get up now and start work. So you can start this whole worry thing, right? I look at it. I see it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I know it takes about 90 minutes for a sleep cycle. And I say to myself, I've got 2 full sleep cycles left. Bam, I'm right back asleep. Okay, so your body and your brain are going to respond regardless of whether you give it a positive message or a negative message. And it's not even going to question it. It's just going to believe you. So
yeah. And I want to tack one question to that, because that was one of the things that a lot of people on my Facebook mentioned, is that a lot of them are getting up now at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3:30 in the morning if they miss it. And you and I talked about the anticipatory anxiety and how that can affect that. So I'm raising that question.
Yeah. So it's sort of really interesting. And this actually sort of goes back to that sleep cycle again. Okay. So as human beings, we are designed to have 2 main sleep periods. Okay. We're supposed to have, if we were all still farmers, right? We'd get up when the sun came up. We'd work for several hours. It would be too hot to be out in the farm. We'd come back in, we'd have a meal, we'd rest, have a siesta. When it got cool again, we'd go back out, we'd work in the farm for a little while longer, and then we'd come back in as the sun was going down because it's too dangerous to be out amongst all of the critters in the middle of the night, so we're going to come back in when the sun goes down. We might then go to bed around, say, 7 or 8 o'clock, depending on whether it's summer or winter months when the light is low. Sleep for about 3-4 hours, maybe 5, wake up for a couple of hours in the middle of the night, and then go back to sleep again. We're not meant to sleep for 8 hours solid. We have, in our industrial age and light pollution, collapsed our time into this very narrow window. When in fact, if we were allowed to expand our window, like quarantine has allowed us to do working from home, right? If we expand our window, we would naturally fall asleep for a few hours, wake up for an hour or two, and then be able to go back to sleep for a few hours. And that middle window of time, what you do in that time is critically important as to whether you're going to be launching your day and staying up for the next 12 hours, or whether you're going to allow yourself to go back to bed. So in that window of an hour or 2 hours, the activities you need to choose to do, remember, your brain is its most creative at that time. Take out a pad of paper and a pencil or a pen and write down some of the free-flowing thoughts that are coming to you in that time period so you can capture it later on. Do not reward yourself for waking up during that time. Like, this is the time when I can get 6 loads of laundry done. This is the time that I can open up my computer and write 4 chapters. This is because if you're waking yourself up too much, you're actually sending a signal. Remember, paying attention to what our brain and our body is asking us to do. You're giving it a signal to say, oh, well, I'm supposed to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and do my laundry. When in fact, maybe you're supposed to be just allowing yourself a break in that sleep to capture some of your creativity and then get some more sleep.
So to follow up on that, that's a good time if you want to do some creative writing. You could do that. But
Right.
Writing your annual report
No.
might not be good.
Yeah. Nothing that's going to give you stress and it's going to trigger that stress response. And if you want to write on an electronic device, just make sure that that electronic device has the blue light blocked.
Okay.
Okay. So almost all the electronic devices either have something, there's a program that I really like that's called F.LUX, flux, but it's F and then the period LUX. And what you can do is you can go in there and you can put in your time zone. And it will put, you'll see it if you're working towards sunset, it will actually transition the light that's coming from, it puts a filter on there and it looks sort of a little orangey tingish color, like if it's sunset. That's not real good if the creative work that you're doing has to do with a lot of color, because it's going to change your color. But it will allow you to continue typing if you're a typist, you know, rather than a handwrite person. But it does pay attention to the light. But another point that you bring out there as well, Josh, is that you need to pay attention to the type of activity that you're doing, that it's not increasing your stress level. It's actually an enjoyable activity. A lot of what happened during that time, back in the olden days, was procreation, which is a wonderful, enjoyable serotonin releasing activity. So if you have a willing partner, that might be a good thing for you to do at that time, which is really good for sleep induction.
That triggers the parasympathetic system to like take you right back to sleep.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Okay, so we had a follow-up to the question about the something in bed, and that's thinking you hear or see someone in the house or room, but again, the brain is not separating the sleep state from the wake state. And how do you work on processing this? It's actually been a problem for her for most of her life.
Right.
And I also had that when I was a teenager. So I'll say what I did then when you're done.
Yeah. So a lot of that sometimes, especially anytime that I hear somebody who says that this has been an experience I've had for my entire life, I say, this is a time for you to introduce yourself to a therapist. Because that means there's something that's been going on that you've built up a pattern of coping for your entire life that's buried way too deep to trigger to say, oh, it's just this particular thing. Okay. So I typically shy away from saying, oh, well, this might be the way that you need to handle it. Because if it's a pattern that you've built up and you've established for your entire life, even if it was in response to something that happened 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it's a pattern you've established that's going to take a lot more than just a one-off answer from me to try to respond to. Sorry, that's not a very good.
No, that's okay. But that's somebody who has expertise in sleep medicine might be helpful.
Yes. And there's a lot of really good psychology. So sleep medicine and psychology is very closely linked together. Nursing and sleep medicine is actually not very well linked together. I'm part of a very small little group of people, but, and I would be happy to talk with this individual if they want to contact me directly. I'd be happy to talk with them a little bit more about it. I just don't think it's appropriate to necessarily give one stock answer because I know it tends to be much more complicated than that.
Yeah. And I think that the answer I give when people ask me these questions, rather than a stock answer, is a process. And the process I tell people is to think about what can kick your brain out of that and rehearse that over and over again before the next time you're in it.
Right.
So when I was younger, I would have that sleep paralysis thing where I would half wake up and feel like there was someone, evil in the room who was going to do me harm.
Right.
And the way that I managed that was I would tell myself to keep my breathing slow, which is what it wanted to do anyway.
Right.
And I would tell myself to, as slowly and gradually as possible, open the eye that was against the pillow and see if I could see anything in the room. And I would listen as hard as I could. And it was later I found out that there wasn't anyone ever in the room. And that was just my way of getting out of it.
Right.
And the same thing can be done with recurrent nightmares. If you, in your brain, rehearse what it's like in that moment and then introduce your deus ex machina, your big miraculous thing that's going to change the dream the next time you have it. If you do that enough, then when you get back into that recurrent dream, you can actually shift what happens.
Right.
So I do tell people that, but I think it's awesome advice when you're having those kinds of problems and you haven't been able to shift out of them to talk to an expert. As you said, it can be hard to find an expert in Alabama. So, but they know how to find you now because you did that.
Yes, they do.
Okay, Rhonda said, thank you for this very interesting information. You're welcome, Rhonda. So I will look for more questions, and I've got, we're at 12:55. Okay, really quick one. I had two. Okay, so two things real quick. Answer whichever one you want to, or both as quick as you can. One is how to manage sleep now with the kids getting up and running around all the time. And the other is that there are a lot of people who used to have jobs that got out at 3 a.m. because they worked at bars or things like that. And now all of a sudden they have normal sleep schedules and they don't know what to do between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. when they would normally get up.
Interesting. Okay, so the second question first. Okay. If you plan on going back to the schedule where you're, awake all of that time, your night job, your bar job, then you might want to actually try to maintain that schedule now, because it allows you to be able to transition back to that sooner. and I'm not sure that that necessarily answered the question or not, but if it's a disruption of, well, I'm normally sleeping during this time and I'm awake during that time and that's confusing, then you can actually just flip yourself around and stay on that other schedule. As far as the question about the kids getting up and running around, I'm wondering, is that a question on how do I as a parent sleep with the kids up and running around, or how do I get the kids to stay in bed and sleep when they're—
Let's take the kids, because we haven't talked about kids. What can you do
Yeah,
with
so
kids?
kids are actually probably the most frustrating thing for parents when it comes to sleep, but they're amazingly trainable. And just like, though, the thing that you have to think about, though, with kids, just like when you go to get, I don't know if any of you have gone to dog training. I want to equate dogs to kids, but for some of us, our dogs are our kids. If you've ever gone to training, they say, well, I'm not actually training the dog, I'm training the owner. Okay. In this case, we're not actually training the kids as much as we're training the parents. So you have to keep them on the schedule. You have to make them understand this is our nighttime routine and this is our daytime routine. And kids love, as much as they fight you, physiologically, psychologically, they love that pattern. They love to stay on a pattern. And even infants as small, as young as a month can begin to be trained to a day, light, dark, night schedule.
Right. And nobody ever wants to live a life where you don't have any like free passes once in a while, right? But that needs to be a solid, established pattern before you deviate from it.
Right. This is the free pass day. This is the free pass time. And you're sort of acknowledging that the consequences of that free pass, like if I eat an entire chocolate cake, I'm acknowledging that extra calorie load is going to result in something, you know, so you're acknowledging that and then you pay it back.
Okay, we have 2 questions and then I'm going to shut it down. So,
Okay.
and I'll also go ahead and plug that next week we're going to have Let's Talk Coping as a Family in Close Quarters. We're still lining up who's going to be on that one, but that's next week's topic. So the 2 questions that I missed, and I apologize that I am just seeing them. The first was from Carolyn. Any suggestions for techniques or practices we can do to calm our minds when we go to bed to help fall asleep? And the other one is, my bedroom does not have any windows and is completely dark all the time. Can people effectively adapt to a lack of light when waking, or should I get one of those light mimicking alarm clocks to slowly introduce light in the morning?
So probably the best way would be either the light mimicking alarm clocks, or if you have smart bulbs in your house and you set your Alexa to turn on the lights at a certain time.
Cool.
Okay? Because we do need that light entrainment. If you think of people who are blind, who can't get that light entrainment, that's where we get that, what we call a free running circadian rhythm, and they're constantly shifting because that light is what cues our brain. Okay, wake up, cut off the melatonin, wake up at this time, or start getting sleepy as the light's going down. So light is very, very important. If you don't, you know, either one of those things, the light producing alarm clock or the Alexa smart lights, those are pretty expensive. So what you can do is set your alarm clock, and then when you get up, flip on as many lights as you can. So all of those bright lights that we do, our makeup, just turn on those lights in the first few minutes, and that will entrain your circadian rhythm as well.
Okay. And the other one was about techniques or practices to calm our minds when we go to bed.
So I like to actually say that you need to calm your mind and your body all day long, okay? Rather than just saying, okay, I'm going to set aside 5 minutes and I'm going to breathe. I'm going to do deep breathing exercises to get ready, go to bed right now. You need to, and breathing is the best thing. Look up breathing exercises. We're running out of time for breathing exercises here. But look at and entrain yourself all day long, because if you're carrying that stress with you, if you sort of think, okay, I've got this bushel and I'm collecting this stress all day long, okay, and you get to, and you say, okay, now boom, it's gone. You can't get rid of something you've collected all day long in 5 minutes before you go to bed. So practicing getting ready, but then also setting your schedule so that you do things in the same sequence. So you go into your room, you brush your teeth, you put on your pajamas, you know, and you do everything in the same sequence. Every step of that sequence sends a recurring and a reinforcing signal to your brain. It's time to get ready for bed.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll tell everybody we're going to have the links that Pat sent me that we mentioned. There's a Time article about nightmares right now during COVID-19. We'll put a link to the F-Lux and to a breathing exercise as well. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'll see you next week when we talk about coping as a family in close quarters. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take
so much,
care.
Pat.
Rest well.